What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Pro vs. Pro. Unfortunately, our boy Justin is stuck on a boat in a storm with bad Wi-Fi, so he won't be able to make it, which is a damn shame because he deserves to be taking a huge victory lap on the Minwoo Lee call from a week ago. We're going to start here with just a bit of a recap of the players, and obviously I think it has to start with that incredible Minwoo Lee call. Wasn't able to close the door, but man, he was in contention. And really the thing that was so cool about it was like kind of exactly in the way that Justin envisioned it. Number one, Justin said, hey, talent over everything else. Minwoo Lee is a talented guy. And that's what we saw for at least 3 days there. And then even down the stretch on Sunday where he was just pulling off some really awesome shots. And the other thing that that Justin called that I really liked was the fact that the long irons for Minwoo on a course where it didn't take as many drivers. Like, yes, strokes gain driving accuracy was so crucial from a predictive standpoint, and it did play out that way as well. Like if you looked at the leaderboard after day 3, you could see the driving accuracy signal, and you could see it even more after day 4. But with Minwoo Lee, there's clearly a major difference in how accurate he is off the tee when he takes driver versus when he's able to club down to that long iron, which you can't say about most golfers. He's kind of an outlier there, and it kind of goes to something that I called out Azinger for on the broadcast, which is, when Minwoo hit the ball with the wedge into the water on number 5, landed on the front, spun it back in, Azinger had just gone on this rant about how Minwoo Lee is one of the best wedge players in the world, and that's one of the that might have been the worst wedge shot that he had hit in like 8 years, or I think was the exact quote from him, which is just complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense. The guy loses a considerable amount of strokes with his wedges, both from 50 to 100 and from 100 to 150 yards. Also loses a bunch with his mid irons, and then is one of the best long iron players in the world. So maybe Azinger was just reading a chart backwards. More likely, he was just talking out of his ass, didn't have any data behind it, and just thought, nobody's going to know if I just completely make this up. And it just so happened that it was the worst timing, because the funniest thing about it to me was Azinger kind of like kept doubling down on it afterwards. Like in the moment, he probably felt like, oh, crap, he just hit a terrible wedge shot. People are going to know I just totally made that up. So I'll just double down a few times. Man, he annoys me. But fortunately, it seems like he annoys most golf fans, and maybe we'll get lucky and we won't have to listen to him for too much longer, but I'm kind of skeptical of that. As far as the rest of the players is concerned, it was not a successful week for me, but there was one cool thing, and that is in last week's Course Fit article, as I do most weeks, I talked about the overlap that Josh and I had in our Course Fit like identifications. And the really cool aspect of it was we actually had a lot of guys kind of in contention and winning. Scotty Scheffler was there. Tyrrell Hatton was there. Jason Day. It was a really nice week from that standpoint. And so we will talk a bunch about where the overlap is this week, because I think that's kind of a really nice approach to take, particularly from a DFS standpoint. Like if you're a follower, in part because of DFS, if you love DFS, finding where the overlap occurs. And this is something that Justin and I have talked about. When two people are taking different approaches and come to the same conclusion, golf is a really hard sport to predict, obviously, right? And so when you have these two different processes leading to the same conclusion, that conclusion becomes more reliable. It's more likely that conclusion is based on real signal and less variance, always something that we're looking out for. So I really like that kind of route of looking at the overlap. So that was maybe my biggest takeaway from the players was, hey, you know what? When we have weeks where the players where Josh and I overlap on deliver to the extent that they did last week, that should be a successful week for me. And so I need to stick a little bit more to the overlap there. And it's kind of like Axis, the previous host or previous co-host, I should say, of Bogey Free last year. Something he talked a lot about was kind of when you're doing your own projections, you should also then take some consideration to the market. Not necessarily like saying, hey, I show an edge over the market here, but I'm just going to course correct for what the market says, and therefore you never have any edge whatsoever. But if you're projecting a guy significantly higher than the market or significantly lower than the market, then maybe you're missing something and you can't account for that. And it's the same idea with my analysis and with the analysis from Josh. If we are very far apart, then maybe either I'm missing something or he's missing something. And then when we have the overlap, we can be a little bit more confident that, hey, we are right on the money here. So that's something that I want to do, or at least focus on going forward, is paying a little bit more attention to that overlap, communicating it to all of you, and then really backing it with my own money and my own DFS play. That's about it that I have for the players. We certainly saw the variance, and it's definitely a little bit annoying that for the second consecutive year, the predicted better weather wave ended up being the unfavorable wave. And unlike last year, where it happened in kind of a predictable way, where you could say, hey, all it would have taken last year was, half a day of rain delays, and then you get into Saturday for that wave, which was the cold, super windy day, which is exactly what happened. This year, Friday morning was supposed to be breezy, and then it was supposed to get progressively windier and windier throughout the day, kind of like Sunday, where that Friday afternoon wave was going to be the most difficult wave. And the wind just kind of totally shifted. And it wasn't like it just shifted a few hours earlier. The wind on Friday morning went from like 8 miles an hour at 6 a.m. to 8 at 7 to 8 at 8 a.m. And then it jumped to like 19 and then 18 and then 17, 18 again. And then it dropped off a cliff. And so it really was just like this 4-hour window of extreme difficulty. And then the afternoon wave didn't get the difficulty that they were expected to get. Super, super weird. And it's something that in the moment, I imagine a lot of people made the mental note, hey, the next time we come across a weather situation where everybody is stacking in one direction, I want to take the opposite route. And I just want to drive home, like, sometimes really, really strange, low probability outcomes happen. And I think that's what we had last week. Not something that we want to assume is going to continue to happen at a high rate in the future. That was an outlier event, and that's kind of all there is to it. It hurt us, but we're going to play it the exact same way the next time, because it was still, I believe, the right probability play to kind of stack that Friday morning wave. And certainly, like, the data shows, not many people did that. You might think to yourself, hey, everybody is going to do this. It's not the case. There were a lot of 5-1 lineups. There were a lot of 4-2 lineups. There were very few 6-0 lineups on the DFS side of things. So continue to just remember that as we get to these weather stacks. I don't know if we'll have one this week. We'll talk about that in chat tomorrow. Might put it in my hot takes article. But for the time being, not really going to focus anything on weather because I haven't seen much. And we're still 2 days out. So even if I was seeing something, I'm certainly not going to trust it that much in this moment. Before we talk about the Valspar, there are a couple things just in general with golf that I want to touch on. And the main one is this golf ball rollback. And many of you may not have even seen this yet, but the USGA and the R&A announced today that they do have a plan in the future, or they have a proposal. It's not set in stone yet. It has to be approved, but they have a proposal to roll the ball back. And I want to talk about this because we've already had some frustrations towards the PGA Tour when it comes to these designated events, losing the cut. And there seems to me to be this theme of the people in charge are making bad decisions, not just in the sense that, hey, I don't like the decision, but in this case in particular with the rollback, I think the decision is terrible in the sense that it also goes against the tour's kind of goal with what they're trying to accomplish here. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are they trying to accomplish? It sounds to me like what they're saying is, hey, guys are hitting the ball too far now. We don't want people chasing distance the way that Bryson did and the way that some other players have. And we want to kind of put a focus again on the precision and the finesse of the game, sort of like that, and bring back the importance and the relevance of some traditional golf courses that maybe players have outgrown, which I don't really think is the case, but that seems to be the argument. The reason I think this is such a terrible idea gets to this idea of diminishing returns of distance. And the way you can think of diminishing returns, if you're not familiar with the term, is imagine a player who averages, let's say, 290 yards off the tee, what is the value to him of adding 10 yards? Well, I know that some guys on Twitter, Lou, I can't remember his last name at the moment. Let me see if I can get it. I can't at the moment. Oh, yeah, Lou Stagner. He's a really great data guy on Twitter. If you haven't seen any of his stuff, there's a lot of really cool stuff on Twitter. But he found that I believe it was like the average amateur gains about 0.7 strokes per round by adding 10 yards off the tee. So if you assume that this guy who averages 290 on tour and bumps that up to 300 can gain 0.7 strokes per round, that's going to be super valuable. How about somebody who goes from 320 to 330? It's probably not going to be as much. And the higher you go, the longer you get, the less another 10 yards is going to do for you. And the reason for this is kind of twofold. Number one, you kind of run out of room where a lot of these tee shots, like you already have such a narrow target, you get to a point where you're hitting the ball so far that it just becomes too difficult to hit fairways. Kind of like the concept that we talk about all the time with the strokes gained driving accuracy metric. But you eventually get to the point where that extra 10 yards is going to make it that much more difficult for you to hit fairways. And at that point, hitting more fairways is actually more important than those extra 10 yards, or at least less so than when you're going from 290 to 300. So maybe when you're at like 330 and trying to get to 340, instead of that helping you 0.7 strokes, maybe that's only helping you by 0.2 strokes or 0.1 strokes. And so instead of putting all your effort into getting from 330 to 340, you might put a little extra effort into your putting or your wedge game, things of that nature. So many players on tour are already at that diminishing returns point where getting longer can only help them so much right now. And that's why you see somebody like Sam Burns went to a smaller head in his driver. So instead of playing the 460cc, I think he went down to 420cc. And basically he was saying, you know what? When I hit the sweet spot, I can pretty much still hit it as far. But when I miss, it's not going to go as far if I hit it a little off the toe or a little off the heel. But what he liked about it is when he didn't hit the exact shot he wanted, the dispersion was tighter. And so his misses weren't as bad. And in the last few events, he has driven the ball better. And that's something we'll talk about here as obviously one of the favorites at the Valspar, but something that I liked going into last week. And he was about the only thing that I got right in addition to Taylor Moore last week, at least in my own lineups. But so we already have guys who are choosing to not maximize their distance. They're basically saying, I have the distance that I want. I have already created an advantage with distance, and now I need to create my advantages throughout the rest of the bag. And one of the other reasons why we see a lot of these guys experiencing the diminishing returns and deciding they have enough distance is because a lot of these golf courses are designed in such a way that the dog legs or the fairway bunkers, they're strategically placed in such a way that they are meant to entice players to take on extra risk for a reward. If they can carry the bunker at the corner of the dog leg, they can shorten the hole by 40 yards. But in doing so, they might end up in the bunker where they then have to just chip out sideways back into the fairway. Things like that, where the design is very much intended to create a risk reward situation, not just that they're intending that, hey, every player has to deal with these bunkers and have to go around them. They want, the architects of these courses want the players to be enticed to try and carry the bunkers. And a lot of the players are saying, I already have the distance on most golf courses where I can take on a lot of the trouble, shorten golf courses in that way. I don't need more distance. What a rollback will do is it will force everybody who is deciding, hey, I have reached the point of diminishing returns and distance, to now say, okay, I will once again be able to gain a ton of strokes if I can create an extra 10 yards off the tee. And so in trying to make people go away from this strategy of becoming as long as they can, they're actually going to force far more players, especially the world's best, back into a situation where they are selling out for distance. We might see, instead of one or two Bryson DeChambeaus every year, we might see like 15 to 20 guys doing exactly what Bryson did to that extreme. And then what are they going to say? That's certainly not the outcome that the tour wants, that the USGA wants, that the RNA wants. And I just don't think they realize that that's what's going to happen. That's a discussion that we're definitely going to have with Justin as well. we will not leave it here. This is, I think, a fascinating topic and one that's going to create a lot of friction throughout the community. And we will continue to talk about it throughout the season as it comes up. It's not going to be a pressing conversation every week, but certainly there are going to be times, maybe around the majors, maybe depending on who wins what tournament, where it becomes a big topic again. So we will get to that quite a bit. And once again, before we get into the Valspar, I do want to just share a few really exciting ideas that we have in the works here at FTN. Data-wise, the one that I'm probably most excited about is a combination of volatility metrics, where the first thing we're going to look at is round-to-round volatility. We already have that, and it's something I talk a lot about. Obviously liking volatility for outright bets. If a player isn't the favorite in the field, then the volatility, like Sam Burns last week, can really help you get win equity. It's going to mean that the guy is more likely to miss the cut or something, but it also means that his best is more likely to contend with the best players in the field. But there are different kinds of volatility. Round to round is the obvious one. It's the one that we use, but the other kinds of volatility are event to event. So there might be a player who is really good at one event, really bad at the other event. And within those events, it may be the case that when he's playing well, he continues to play well. When he's playing poorly, he continues to play poorly. So we're also going to have a third volatility metric that's basically a round-to-round volatility within events only. So if the guy is playing really well in one event but is shooting low scores, and then really poorly the next event but consistently shooting high scores, the round-to-round volatility that we're commonly using is going to show a high round-to-round volatility because he was really good a bunch and really bad a bunch. The within event volatility will show he was consistent in the first, he was consistent in the second event, so he's going to be a low volatility in that way. And then we're just going to be able to use these different metrics of volatility in some really cool and valuable ways, and it's yet another unique thing that other sites don't have. And then a really fun one that's mostly just for the majors, outside of the Masters, where we don't have a ton of data on a golf course, is a correlation tool, where we'll basically be saying, hey, historically, when this player has played really well, so has this player. And this correlation, of course, can come out of randomness to some degree, but it's also going to come from similar course fit, both in ways that we can measure, like maybe the guys who are super accurate off the tee, Colin Morikawa, John Rahm, Corey Connors. Those guys are going to be, are going to find success in a lot of the same events. It could be the guys who are really strong around the green, or guys who are really strong putting, or maybe guys who are excellent ball strikers but struggle on the green. Again, Morikawa, Zalatoris, Luke List, guys like that might be finding success in the same tournaments. But then it also might be some course fit stuff that we can't know, like shot shape, or that we can't quantify, like shot shape, or I don't know, maybe there's a lot of elevation change in a course, and there are some guys who really, really struggle to make those kind of distance adjustments, and then there's some guys who make those distance adjustments really well. We don't know what we'll find, but we're pretty excited about what we might find, and so that's another really cool thing in the works here at FTN. And now let's get to Valspar. It's not the most exciting event, but what I do like about it is it's pretty unique in the landscape of the events that we've had lately, where we've pretty much gone from extremely strong field to overwhelmingly weak field. And for the first time in what seems like months, we have an event where the field is not deep. There is not a ton of depth of talent, but the upper end of talent is still really good. We have quite a bit of star power here. Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Sam Burns, Matt Fitzpatrick, then this like secondary tier, Fleetwood, Justin Rose, Keegan Bradley, and then you kind of get into the weaker aspects of the field. But even in that kind of group of players, we have some exciting guys that we're going to want to talk about this week. But from a course fit perspective, the thing to look at this week is iron play above all else. So we have almost a third of the entire weight on iron play here. That's well above average. That's coming mostly at the expense of driving distance. Not surprising. This is a course that takes driver out of the player's hands quite a bit. And it's also a course where we see the signal for driving accuracy, maybe not boosted, but it's at least at kind of tour average. weight. So there's this very clear pattern once again of when iron play is really predictive. It's not surprising to see accuracy at least play some role, because in order for a player to really use that strength and capitalize on that iron strength, they have to be in position to do so. That's where that driving accuracy signal is coming from. And then, as Josh pointed to once again in his Course Notes and Quotes article, there's a lot of course management signal here. And clearly there's this correlation between having a course management signal and bogey avoidance being really important. More on that in a second, though. We also have a strong weight on putting and on around the green play. I do think around the industry, putting is probably going to be a little bit undervalued this week. And I hate saying that because putting is so volatile. I don't want putting to be predictive at a course because it's really hard to predict who's going to putt well on a week-to-week basis. The best putters in the world have some really terrible weeks on the green. You can't really say that about the best drivers in the world. You know, Jon Rahm is never going to go out and lose 2 strokes per round off the tee for 4 days. It just doesn't happen. But even the best putters in the world can do that on a fairly consistent basis on the greens. But I do think iron play, putting, around the green play, driving accuracy. But let's talk about bogey avoidance here, because this is a really interesting discussion. The biggest caution, or the biggest kind of word of caution that I want to give, is you can't just go to the PGA Tour website, search bogey avoidance, and look for players at the top and ignore anyone below that. You also can't just go to Fantasy National or a site like it and build a model that has bogey avoidance as a high weight, because bogey avoidance is incredibly dependent on where a player has played. What courses has he played? What are the strengths of field? That sort of thing. And it leads you to some really kind of misleading numbers. So instead of looking at raw ranking of bogey avoidance, what we're going to look at instead is the difference between a player's ranking in birdie or better percentage and their bogey avoidance. So if a player is 100th in birdie or better rate, but 50th in bogey avoidance, that is better for our course fit adjustment than somebody who is 25th in birdie or better and 25th in bogey avoidance, or even like 20th in bogey avoidance and or even someone like 40th in bogey avoidance and 20th in birdie or better rate. We want that big difference where a player is much better from a bogey avoidance standpoint than a making birdie standpoint. And that gets back to the whole idea of like everything that we do is an adjustment off a baseline. And so we already know how good a player is from the expected strokes gain projections, from the baseline expected strokes gain projections especially. And so when we're looking for course fit, we want to adjust off of that baseline. The raw number of bogey avoidance, the raw number of birdie or better percentage, even adjusted for field strength, is only going to tell us how good the player is, not how much we should be adjusting the player either up or down from their baseline projection. So I think that's a really important point to make. There are a handful of guys this week, as I put in my Course Fit article, that I love in large part because they are far better at avoiding bogeys than they are at making birdies. And that takes us to the overlap section for this week. So some of the guys that both Josh and I are really, really kind of excited about this week begins with Eric Cole. And Eric Cole, funny enough, is somebody who both Josh and I pointed to at the Honda Classic and both said, you know what, he's popping in the projections. We don't quite trust it yet. He's really bad off the tee, but you should know he projects well, even though we're not at a point where we're confident enough to bet it or to play him on DraftKings. Not the case this week. We both really like him. Kind of a perfect course fit all around. The only hesitation is with his driving, and it's with that driving accuracy. But hey, we're actually seeing some cause for optimism there. At the time of the Honda Classic, before the Honda Classic started, he had yet to gain in a single event off the tee on the tour. And that goes back to September 18th in the FTN Championship. He played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 tour events in a row without gaining off the tee then gained at the Honda, lost a bunch at Bay Hill, and then gained a bunch of strokes off the tee at the Players. Gained in both distance and accuracy at the Players. That was really cool to see. So 2 out of the last 3 he's gaining. Is it something that I trust? Like, would I say, hey, I now believe that Eric Cole is good off the tee? Absolutely not. But is it enough of a sign that I'm now able to say the rest of his game is really strong, and there are signs here off the tee that he can at least kind of hold his ground there and not put himself behind the 8 ball off the tee? Absolutely. So I really like Eric Cole this week. I placed a 90-1 each way bet on him on Bet Rivers. I can check real quick to see if that is still there using our prop shop. He's available at 100-1 at BetMGM, 95-1 at FanDuel, and still 90-1 with an each way option on Bet Rivers. I will take the 90-1 with the each way all day long over the 100-1 without question. I think that's a far better bet. So that's my path with Eric Cole. I also love Taylor Moore this week. He's my other bet, 60-1, not an each way bet, but Taylor Moore is somebody that I really feel like he's another one of those guys that we've talked about a lot, where we can kind of project a breakout coming from him, where he has been great off the tee basically from the moment he got on tour, yet is still improving. He's gaining in both distance and accuracy off the tee, and doing so more and more each week. The putting has always been there. The around the green play has always been there. His weakness has been approach play, but it's rapidly improving. And one of the reasons why I really like Moore this week is because he's far better at avoiding bad shots with his irons than he is at creating great shots. And then I also like the fact that his mid irons and especially his long irons have really become the strength of his iron play, both of which are maybe boosted a little bit here at the expense of wedge play, just because so many of the iron shots this week are going to come from that like 150 to 250 range instead of with wedge play. So yet another point in Taylor Moore's favor there. And he's no longer available at 60, still 55 at Caesars, which is where I originally had the 60 number. I still like 55. I even like 50, which is available at MGM, DraftKings, PointsBet, and FanDuel. 40-1 with an each way on Bet Rivers. In this scenario, I will take the 50% or at least close to it boost just for the straight outright instead of the each way option. Some other players with overlap. I'll go through some of the more predictable names: Jordan Spieth, Keegan Bradley, Matt Fitzpatrick, Sam Burns. No surprise in any of those guys here. But then we get into some sleepers: Alex Smalley, Steven Yeager, Ben Griffin, and maybe my favorite name on this list, Nick Taylor. Taylor just gains like in every single way that we want here. He's accurate off the tee, good short game, good putter. We've seen him really spike already this year. His iron play historically is maybe I'd say the weakest part of his game, but he has, like I said, he has spiked in that area. He gained 0.7 per round in the Phoenix Open when he finished second. He gained a bunch at the Sony Open, gained a bunch at the Houston Open. So he's capable with the irons. It's maybe the weakest part of his game right now, but he's capable and just a solid course fit, really good DraftKings price. I don't think it's an outright bet for me, but he might be one of my favorite DFS plays in large part because he's going to be contrarian and we have the overlap with Josh there. So that's a really exciting play for me. I can't go any longer without mentioning Justin's call this week, Pearson Coody. Last week's Minwoo Lee, perhaps. Coody is a really, really fascinating case because it kind of depends on the sample size that you're looking at. He gained 2.2 strokes per round at Bay Hill. Phenomenal effort. 14th place finish in a really strong field on a really difficult golf course. If you work backwards from there, though, again, the sample becomes really, really interesting because he made the cut at the Honda, but still lost about 2/3 of a stroke per round. Just really didn't finish strong there. was cut in his previous Korn Ferry Tour event, losing over 3 strokes per round after winning the Korn Ferry Tour event that he played before that, only gaining 1.1 strokes, though, in that win. Kind of I guess you'd say a sloppy win. Maybe the whole field was kind of bunched together. So he got the win, which says a lot, but wasn't able to separate. So here's where it gets really interesting. Prior to that event, he had lost strokes in 4 consecutive events and was probably averaging about 2.5 strokes lost per round. But at the same time, this past spring, I should say, he really established himself as somebody with an enormous ceiling. He won twice between April and June. So he just got his third win, I would say, in half a year in that Panama Championship on the Korn Ferry Tour in early February. But man, 2 of those wins, both wins in the spring, he gained over 3 true strokes in each of those events. That's, that might be good enough to win this event at the Valspar. It might take a little bit more than that, but we can already see this guy, when he plays well, he can contend on the PGA Tour. He's not like somebody who's saying, you know what, my best stuff isn't good enough yet, but it will be in the future. No, his best stuff is already good enough. So this call from Justin, which by the way was a call to win, it was Pearson Coody is winning this week, is well within the range of outcomes, I would say. I was actually DM'd this morning about Coody, and I wasn't totally sold, but now that Justin is kind of on him, and right after the Minwoo Lee call, I certainly can't say anything against it. Looked a little bit more into his past and saw that the 2 wins last year, one on the Korn Ferry Tour, one as an amateur, those were phenomenal wins. He didn't just beat us a weak field like he did at the Panama Championship, where the win was only 1.1 true strokes gained. Winning with over 3 true strokes, that is incredibly impressive. So I am suddenly Team Coody. I don't think I'll be playing him on DraftKings. Actually, I know that I won't be playing him on DraftKings just because we're seeing way too many really, really bad outcomes from him. I don't want that missed cut equity in my single entry lineup, but the win equity, or at least like the top 10 equity, the ceiling is very much there with him. So I like that route as well. And certainly if Justin can back up the Minwoo Lee call with an impressive Coody showing, man, talk about the victory lap that he'll be taking next week. Can't wait to see that one. Hey, solo show tonight, so I appreciate you all tuning in. And I think that'll do it for this week. We're back next week. We might go a little bit early with the match play on, and we're going to have like a big simulation tool for the match play as well. That's another thing I meant to mention that's in the works here at FTN. So really excited for that. We're kind of already using the simulation tool this week for March Madness. We were using it in the last few weeks in college basketball for some of these tournament championships. Really excited to kind of repurpose that for the match play championship here on the PGA Tour. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.